Hey everyone, glad to have you here today. It's Howie Scott and Steve. As you can see, we got our special guest, our CEO of Crisis Consultant Group on the line with us. He's out on location, but he was able to dial in. He's got a special treat for you guys. First of all, Happy New Year. I hope you all are being safe. And so far, 2021 has been pretty good for you. If this is your first time here, just a brief introduction of myself. My name's Howie Scott. I was a law enforcement officer for 31 years. Most of that time was spent on a full-time SWAT team right outside the Washington, D.C. area. I later finished my career at the academy, and I took 4 days off. And then I joined Crisis Consultant Group, just really mainly because I believe in so strong on what they're teaching and what they're doing. I originally came in on the active threat side and then cross-trained over into Calm Every Storm. And a master instructor in both. Really happy to see you guys here again today. I forget what number this is. Maybe Brendan will remind us, but I know we're in the 30s. And I'm going to turn it over to my buddy Steve, that you can also see. He's going to tell you about himself, and then we'll bounce on over to Brendan.
Right on. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here again. I hope that everyone had a good holiday season and that the new year is kicking off well. Steve Nagloski. I am the lead for CES, so the verbal de-escalation, physical intervention portion of Crisis Consultant Group. In the first 17 years of my professional career, I worked in residential treatment, juvenile males, 12 to 17. I had the opportunity to come on with CCG full time, and I really didn't hesitate because I saw how positively it impacted the organization that I had worked with, and to have the opportunity to share that message with people all over the world, I jumped on it, and we haven't looked back. So we'll hand it off to Brendan.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right. Excellent. Well, gang, I apologize that I can't get on camera today, but my team here, some handsome gentlemen, which I always am happy to see. So you just have my voice today, but I want to just say thank you for joining us today. As mentioned, we've been doing these webinars since the beginning of COVID, and really just our intention was to get information out to folks like yourselves that are working on the front lines, or even maybe at home in this situation and waiting to get back to it. But because of the clientele we serve, most of you most likely are actually still at work or dealing with individuals on those front lines. So we felt just kind of the need to get this free information out there, hold these webinars. So as mentioned, we've been doing this now, I think since March, roughly about March. And we've been holding them just about every week. Those of you who were here last week, we had to cancel last minute. Apologize for that. But we are here every Thursday, East Coast time, about 1 o'clock. You will catch the replay of this automatically. So for those of you who either have to jump off, or folks that that you think would benefit from today's session, you will receive an email automatically from the system letting you know go watch this replay. So with that, I'm going to kind of take off today as far as with this topic, and then the guys are going to chime in, and we love seeing your comments as they come in the chat over there. We've got Tracy in the chat area responding and available to answer any questions that might come up, as well as the guys are going to be continually scanning it and answer any questions that you might have as we go through. So with that, my name is Brendan King. My bio is on the website. You probably already saw it. If you didn't, just know I've been dealing with crisis scenarios since I was 19 in the professional world, from mental health to law enforcement to Marine Corps combat overseas, SWAT tactics, and started this company 16 years ago. And as the guys mentioned, we've trained all over the globe and continue to do so, and helping really, I like to say, calm the world down. So with that, one of the lessons I wanted to talk about today was the connection between panic and ourselves being in a panic, and considering that as being at our lowest state, whereas in our highest state would actually be stillness. And when I say highest state in this frame, I think of it as our highest state related to how helpful or effective we can be to de-escalate somebody else that's in crisis. And so what this came from was, I was sitting in a training 2 weeks ago where the gentleman was talking about how we can best be of service to others around us. And what he talked about is that, you know, in reality, when we go into a heightened state ourselves, when we get escalated, and at our worst, we would be in a state of panic. And as you all know, you know, when we are functioning in a state of panic, our amygdalas in our brain is highly active. We are starting to, you know, potentially go into fight or flight ourselves. And in that state, as a responder, if we get to that point, we are in really bad shape. And for many of you that have been dealing with individuals in crisis for a long time, or you've worked in environments where you've been exposed to crisis or violent situations, you've seen either times where you yourself have gotten to that state because of what you're witnessing is just so stressful, and maybe you just haven't been trained or well prepared for it, or you're watching somebody else as a coworker that is escalating to this state. And so as a result of that, you know, it's easy to see sometimes in somebody else around us that they are in a heightened state, and sometimes be in a real panic ourselves of like watching this go down and not being able to help that individual, or recognizing that they don't see within themselves that they're reacting to a scenario in this heightened state and potentially making it worse. So I'm going to start there. And just kind of give the guys an opportunity to talk about maybe an example where you yourself have seen a coworker been in a state of panic, or you yourself have gone to a place of panic, and just in your experience. So just take a couple minutes, guys, if you don't mind, and maybe share an experience that you've seen or witnessed that situation happen.
Yeah, well, I think I can relate it back to law enforcement and being on the street. The first couple of years of my law enforcement career, I spent working in the at the county jail as a deputy sheriff, and really got the opportunity to see people on the other side of panic, outrage, escalated. And that experience gave me the opportunity to deal with people in crisis on a daily basis. And I was able to transfer that when I went to the street. And I could see younger officers who routinely fell into what you described today as a panic mode, right? They became loud talkers, over talking to people that were talking, not letting them a chance to vent. I realized from my career in the sheriff's office that sometimes people just need to vent. And that stillness or that quiet is something that is very effective tool to use to let someone get out what they're experiencing in that moment of crisis. If they're not a threat to you physically or anybody else or themselves at that point in time, then obviously you have the opportunity to be still. Often, I think we find ourselves in a situation, especially if we have an authoritative position, that we feel like we have to out-talk the other person or fill in awkward moments of silence. But sometimes I think what's worked best for me in my career is just to be quiet, right? And a lot of the questions you're trying to get answered that you may ask, they end up giving them up themselves. Once again, something we always talk about, people like to be listened to. They don't like to be told what to do. So I would say I've had numerous experiences throughout my career where I was able to bring the calm to the storm, as opposed to bringing another storm where you might have another younger officer who doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with people that might be of the criminal element, and they feel like they have to do something instantly. I was more on the other side of, all right, let's just play this out. All right, you're venting. I understand you're upset. Keep talking, and that stillness, which is a good word, bringing that to the game can often calm that person down just by not out shouting them, out talking them, and filling in those awkward gaps.
Excellent. Good one. Stevie, you got a quick example of where you've seen coworker in panic, or you yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just playing off of what Howie said, I see it more in the new staff that haven't been exposed to crisis, and they panic. And we talk about using unnecessary words, and then I look at who those seasoned staff that I ended up kind of modeling myself after, that I brought in as mentors in my life, because that calm is contagious. And you see that when when you give people the opportunity to express their emotion fully and kind of suspending that judgment, and understanding what crisis is and helping people to work through that panic and helping to de-escalate them, it's huge. And I know for myself as a young staff, when I was first starting, because we're always seeing new situations, I had that in my stomach, that sense of unrest, where a sense of urgency, where I feel like I have to respond. And as I've grown as a professional, I understand that I can take time and that silence can be a very powerful tool as well.
Awesome. Excellent. No, and you guys make great points. So here we know that in crisis situations, just like I've experienced, and I can tell you, I've shared this story before, maybe in live training, but when I was in Iraq for the war in 2003, the very first time I was in the Marine Corps, the very first time that we got shot at, the scenario was such that we were in kind of a what they call a hold down position. We were kind of behind this sand berm, just kind of resting, because it was the hottest part of the day. We would take a couple hours rest and just kind of wait. And then, because everybody liked to fight at night. And so the reality was, in the hottest part of the day, everybody kind of took a little siesta. Well, I remember all of a sudden shots starting to come out, and I jumped up from where I was. I left my weapon, I left my vest, and I ran up to the top of the sand berm to look over it and actually see, like, oh, this is cool. Where is it coming from? And this is not at all how a Marine is supposed to act. And the reality was, my brain was in panic. It was in panic in the sense that I was not aware of what was happening. It was hijacked. My brain was kind of the fight, or not really the fight. It was more in the flight of, like, where's it coming from and where am I going to need to go? And so that's a scenario where I would like, I was trained, I was well trained, and really should have been in a spot where I would react a certain way. And the reality is, none of us know until we're in a situation how we are absolutely going to act when something tragic or highly violent happens. And I'm sure many of you here on this call have had experiences where your brain almost gets hijacked. And to think that you're just all of a sudden always going to act exactly as you trained. Howie was one of my SWAT instructors when I went through sniper school. And one of the things they talk about in sniper school is what's called the natural respiratory pause. And that is where a sniper actually is supposed to, if you have to take a shot, where you actually squeeze the trigger. And the natural respiratory pause is, if all of you are on the call right now, if you would, bear with me for a moment. I want you to take a deep breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Normal breath. Now, as you breathe in again, I want you to hold for a half a second, breathe out. Now, right at that exhale, in that moment, before your body feels the demand to take that next breath, is what's called the natural respiratory pause. It's that space in between breaths. And at that moment in time, as training as a sniper, if you have the opportunity, you squeeze the trigger in that moment, because what happens is your body is at its calmest, if you will, in a state in between breaths, where your body isn't moving as much as it is in an uphail, in an inhale or an exhale. And so, of course, there's more to it there. And Howie's the expert on that. But the reality being is that there is a place where we all can go to emotionally, physically, mentally, that is a calm. And that's where I was talking about. And Steve, you just alluded to it, and Howie mentioned the other side of panic and our most still is where we go to a place of silence, and where we might close our mouths, as Howie was talking about, and allow the person who's in crisis to have the opportunity to express themselves. And taking from what you both said is often as responders, we feel this demand to have to say something in the moment, that, okay, this person's escalated. They're saying, X, Y, Z to me, and I've got to come up with the right answer. And I've got to remember my training and say exactly what I was taught in the class. And many programs put so much emphasis on saying the exact words or the exact statement that actually makes it come off as robotic. instead of giving you that freedom to say, hey, I'm just going to be still in this moment. And that my highest form of response could just be being still and being that calm person, that calm, just kind of being in that moment where I'm at my most still for this person to just say, hey, I'm here. And hey, I hear you. And I this must be tough. What you're going through looks like, it sounds like this is a really difficult spot right now. And sometimes that's it. It's just acknowledging that you see that this person is in this state of panic and in this state of crisis and not having that magic answer. And this kind of brings me to the other piece that I want you guys to also talk about is so when we talk about stillness, so in this training I just went through, we were talking about how when someone goes to sound or music school and they want to become a sound engineer, right? So someone who is going to, maybe work for a music band or a rock band that's putting on concerts, that as a sound engineer, one of the most fundamental things that they must learn is silence. How to actually remove sound from the air, the quote unquote air. Let's say you're getting ready a band is going to hit the stage. I didn't even know this was a fact. I always thought, oh yeah, a sound guy, they're making sure like this microphone is loud enough and that microphone is, picking up on the drums or what have you, and weighing it out so that there's none of the crackles and none of the like you all have heard it. You've gone to a place where the microphone's too close to the speaker, right? And I'm not going to make that sound, it sounds like a horrible cat getting her tail pulled, but where it makes that loud screech. And so their job is to not just make sure that there's not too much highs or too much crackles, but it's actually to navigate and effectively create the best silence. Because by creating this silence with no buzzing and no screeching and no high crackles, then the sound from the actual artist is going to be beautiful. It's going to come out magical. And that's where, to me, it's like, hey, how do we become the most effective at being silent? And that's where, and we guys have covered it before in our webinars, is that self-awareness to shut out our own voice, our own judgments, our own biases that are getting in the way, that are, in other words, not allowing us ourselves to be silent in our own mind, which then often comes out in our body language and our tone to that person as they're speaking. So guys, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, just some things you were talking about. I wanted to reiterate on that, because things happen to the body also, right? Internally, that when you're not silent, when you're in that panic mode, right? Like some of the things you're experiencing are auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, and elevated blood pressure. All those things contradict fine motor skills, right? And you're putting yourself at a distinct disadvantage by becoming in that panic mode to handle crisis. So routinely what happens is you become louder or you just continue to talk. They often say, like, children, when you're yelling at your kids, they don't hear what you're saying. They really hear about the first 4 words, and all after that, all they hear is yelling, right? Same thing happens with adults. If you think about an argument or something you've had in the past where it was escalated, and how much of that can you remember? You probably remember the hurtful things, and that's about it, but nothing else that might have been constructive or during that conversation. And that's because your brain is focusing on important things, right? It's trying to be still, but you won't let it because your mouth is overriding your brain at that point in time, and you continue to talk. I've seen it over and over again. I think it's one of the things that happens, routinely during escalated events and crisis, that we start to just talk, and that becomes somewhat our cure to handle the panic mode. Now, when you talk about stillness is not easy, especially for us in a technology advancing world. You think about how long it is between the time you check your email, your text message, or your Facebook or any other account you might have. And that creates unrest and not stillness, right? So I think stillness is one of those things you have to practice on your own, and it will just incorporate into your repertoire as you deal with people in crisis. I also think that training is a big issue as far as setting people up for the crisis moment, right? So even in law enforcement, there's not adequate enough training, and I hope to see that come forward, de-escalation training, where we take our police officers and teach them how to deal with people in crisis verbally, right? So they take that opportunity to introduce their own still and de-escalate the situation. But the more training you have in those type of situations, the more inoculated you get towards it when it pops up. It shouldn't just be the live training, the real event. We should have training in all areas that deal with people in crisis. That when we are training, we implement training that we have where people are in crisis and there is a result. And sometimes if you're in a facility that may go physical, it may have to take your training to the physical component. But more times than not, and certainly in law enforcement, the outcome is not a physical encounter. It's more of a de-escalation encounter. And that's really one of the things I think that law enforcement as community has failed at in their basic training, is not giving new recruits the opportunity for more de-escalation scenarios in their academies.
That's awesome, Howie. And I think there's so much you can take away with that. We talk about, everyone's alluded to that we believe we can de-escalate the majority of situations, right? And within our curriculum, we believe that 99% of crisis situations can be verbally de-escalated, but it's becoming comfortable with that silence. And it's through training, it's through repetition. I know for myself personally, a crisis situation, when I'm feeling that anxiety, when I'm feeling that those nerves come up, I feel like I've got to have a response. But the reality is, if I can take a couple seconds, it just, as Brendan showed us, the breathing exercise, and we find that pause, I think that's oftentimes when some of the most powerful words and solutions come to us that we can then share. But it's, again, it's allowing that person to express their emotion fully, and it's us taking the time and showing that patience. And we say it all the time, but calm is contagious.
That calm is contagious. That is so absolutely true. You know, when we are around coworkers, teammates, and I'm sure most of us have experienced that, where we've had someone that we've worked with who has just been an amazing, like, you just watch them work and you're like, man, how did they, afterwards you're like, how did they stay calm through that? Like I would have lost my mind. And when you talk to them, you know, and it's kind of funny because, and you guys probably have experienced this too, as instructors, when we travel around and the rest of the team travels to different facilities, there's always one or two people at each location that you just get a vibe from them during the training that they just have the it. They just have the thing. They have this peaceful, I'd say peaceful warrior. They are committed to helping. They're committed to you know, serving mankind, and yet they have this amazing patience and calmness about them that just is exuding out of them, even during the training. And you know, I think of, in a perfect world, you know, every facility would do their human resources hiring process, and where they would only find, you know, those individuals that they're motivated, they're compassionate, they have some life experience, they've got some, you know, some credentials behind them of some kind, that, you know, they can walk the walk and talk the talk. But they also have this being inside of them that others want to emulate, that they see it and feel it when you come into their presence. So you're like, man, they just got it. And so I love that calm is contagious, that if we find people like that we can associate ourselves with, you know, it's always been said, we're the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with in your life, that is who you truly become. So if I'm surrounded by people in a workplace environment that have a propensity to escalate and make things worse, and not ever close their mouth and not let other people have a word, well, the odds are I'm going to end up either completely shutting down and be completely ineffective, or I'm going to start to gravitate to be like they are and respond in a similar way. You know, I remember years ago we were in a facility that up north, and those individuals that have been at that facility for so many years had such seniority that the new people that came in were scared to death to actually go with their gut and kind of go against this, what had become the status quo of escalating things, because they just were too new. And sadly, they left the organization because that old mindset was still there, and it created a lot of problems. So there's great pieces, guys, that I think you'd add. And it's funny, it reminded me of years ago, and I thought this was maybe a good thing to kind of wrap up with, is years ago I had an opportunity. I was in Paris, and I was and this was, as a young man, I had a family member had died, my great aunt, who had left me some money, and I thought, I'm gonna go travel a little bit. And so I went over to Europe, and there was an opportunity where and I was chasing this girl, of course, who had done this cross-cultural for school. Okay, you guys, all right, I have to admit. So she was over there. I was trying to impress her, and I thought, well, I'm going to meet her and her classmates over there, and we'll travel around for a few days that she had some days off. Anyways, I end up at the Louvre, which I am not an art guy, but it was one of those things that, like, people say, well, when you go to Paris, you have to go to the Louvre. Okay, well, I was very uncomfortable. It was not my scene, as you guys know. But I go in, and there's a great story to this. They had a concert. And the concert that night was a guy by the name of, now again, I know nothing about classical music. I know nothing really about anything other than radio music. I was in my early 20s. And it was a guy by the name, who was a cellist, a guy by the name of Yo-Yo Ma. Now, Steve, you know who that is. Howie, you may know. I didn't know who that was. I had absolutely no idea. And some of you on the call, you know who that was. I didn't. Yo-Yo Ma is like one of the world's best cellists, right? And I'm pretty sure it was a cello. And I had no idea. Well, what was amazing to me was this. So I go into this concert. I'm like, okay, I'm going to say that I went to a concert at the Louvre. You got to do it. So I'm in this concert. I'm sitting in the audience. Out comes this guy. He's playing on his cello. Yes, it was pretty. I mean, I'll admit it was nice, but I was definitely not smart enough to appreciate it. But what I did appreciate was this: while he was playing in the concert, it was dead silent. A couple hundred of us there watching. But as soon as the last note of the song stopped, all of a sudden, the entire audience erupted in coughing, sneezing, moving around. Every type of sound you could imagine happened in between the last note and when he started playing again. And I was literally, I remember looking around the audience like, what's wrong with all of you people? Everybody was coughing, adjusting. And obviously they were doing, but that was the etiquette. Was that, hey, when the artist is at work, you choke your spouse if they're making a sound. Nobody makes a sound, right? And so I was so amazed at how people could control that. But so I was reminded of this as we're talking and finishing up here, is that the person in crisis, if we can go to a place in our mind where we give them the respect of that they are the artist in that moment, and we must silence ourselves and give them that moment that, hey, they are in crisis right now. We need to be respectful of that and quiet our mind, quiet our body, quiet everything that's going on with us so that we can give them our most complete and full attention. That is how then maybe in those breaks in between the songs are when we can actually interject and offer some de-escalation that's going to be of value, and that truly is the art of de-escalation to me, is finding those moments of stillness within ourselves where we quiet our own voice and say, hey, we're not the most important person in the room right now. The person in crisis is. And if we can show and demonstrate respect to them in that moment, we can then hopefully quiet our own mind, get ourselves out of panic, and in those breaks find a couple maybe insightful things to say that are going to help with that crisis and de-escalate it. So with that, we're at minute 29. Guys, any last rounds that you want to throw out there to the group before we end for today?
I was just going to say the last thing I had, what people I learned the most from were the ones that were calm and didn't say much. But when they said something, you listened and you remembered it, as opposed to the talkers. They wouldn't make great webinar hosts, but they certainly had a meaningful information to pass out when they did speak. And I've tried to become that type of person when I deal with folks that are escalated. Bring the calm and try to say something that is worthwhile in the conversation and meaningful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, I agree fully. I think there's a lot of power in silence. And honestly, Brendan, that the story of the Louvre, I hadn't heard that before. I love it. I think that is a very powerful analogy that I'm going to use moving forward.
Awesome.
It's excellent.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad. Yeah, you reminded me of it. That calm is contagious and all the pieces you guys talk about. So I love it. Well, gang, I really appreciate you all being on the call today. Definitely, as mentioned, you'll get a replay. I know Tracy put in the chat a link to our website. You can also get a certificate for being on today, where you can get it from just emailing Tammy at crisisconsultantgroup.com. Again, it's there in the chat. Once again, thank you all for being here. Thank you guys for participating today. Sorry I couldn't get on camera. I'm on the road, but we look forward to seeing you all in the weeks ahead. And hopefully the next couple weeks are going to be a little bit calmer in the world than they have been. And we wish everyone the safest and best start of the year. So thanks for everyone and being here. And thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. Take care.